continuing our talk about what is writing. Let's see, where did I stop? Let's made a note of where I stopped. I did not. Wonderful. Well, I know I stopped with Aristotle, right? So I'm still on the first page. Ah, that's okay. Aristotle, yes, this is where I stopped. This gentleman here, not an actual picture. We don't know what he looked like, but an artist's conception of what this ancient Greek philosopher looked like. Aristotle. You can see his dates there. He lived in the BC, which we talked about yesterday, from 384 to 322 BC. I'll get you, sir. Mr. McKillop? Why is it counting down? Why is it 384 to 322? Why not the reverse? Huh?
Hasn't turned over yet.
Turned over to what?
AD.
Hasn't turned over to AD. Yeah, what would happen when AD comes around? Or CE? Huh? Yeah, why does it start going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but before it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the reverse, counting down? Anyone see Independence Day? Yes, Mr. Barnett?
Because it's like, where Christ is like countdown.
Yeah, it's counting down to the birth of Christ, yeah. It's counting down to the time to 1 AD, when Jesus of Nazareth is believed to have been born, although he wasn't born in 1 AD. Actually, according to the calendar's wrong. He was born, but he just wasn't born in 1 AD. The person who made the calendar was just off by a few years. But anyway, so this guy Aristotle, so he lived in the 4th century BC, so around 400 years before the time of Jesus of Nazareth or Christ. Okay? And he wrote a bunch of things. He was a philosopher. I don't know if anyone's taken philosophy yet. Anyone take a philosophy course? Dr. Messina, the other guy. What did you do? For logic? Ooh, truth tables. That's a lot of fun. Ms. Taylor and Ms. Senior. Okay, Ms. Senior, what are you taking? Human condition? Interesting. Anthropology, I guess. So you're talking about human nature and stuff like that? Oh, really? Logic. Logic in humans? Really? Have you met any humans lately? I mean, if we were Vulcans, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But okay, so you probably stumble over Aristotle because he wrote some seminal, meaning very important books on logic. But we're not looking at that. We want to look at his book more on rhetoric, which is called De Interpretatione in Latin. And we only really have it in a Latin title, philosophy, even though he wrote in Greek, because he was in ancient Greece. So he's writing in the Greek language, ancient Greek language. But it was translated into Latin, just the Latin name stuck rather than the Greek, De Interpretatione, on interpretation. Yeah? Basically the same in English, We took interpretation from Latin into our language. All right? We did a lot of that. Thank God for that. Thank God the French invaded us or I should say invaded us, but invaded England 1,000 years ago, because they brought all sorts of Latin words into the English language, which, as you know, is Germanic. So we have those. We have double. We have a German word for something, and then we have a Latin word for something. So we have flesh for meat, or what we would say meat, but flesh. But we also call it beef. It's basically the same thing, Kingly, his kingly reign, or her kingly, but royal as well, royal, which means the same thing. One's from king, one's from, Roy, king as it was in Norman French at the time. So De Interpretatione may be written around 350 BC. Yes, I did. Maybe written by Aristotle sometime around 350. Okay. It's part of what philosophers, I'm not going to give you a ton of information about it because it's not relevant, but just to give you some context, this work, De Interpretatione, is part of a larger body of writings called the Organon, which could be interpreted or translated just in that way. Like an organ is a set of tissues, right? Those of you who are in health sciences, an organ is a set of tissues that complex set of tissues that come together to form one thing that does one thing, like a bunch of different tissues form a kidney, and their whole job is to purify the, blood of urine and not urine, but impurities and stuff like that. The liver too cleans the blood and stuff. So you could also interpret this in a more anatomical way as Organon, as his body of work. So within his body of work, the Organon of Aristotle, he has a number of writings in this collection, and this is part of some of his writings on logic, and also what's called dialectic, which is just a fancy word for dialogue or rhetoric or speaking. Public speaking is how we would say it now. You might have been in the public speaking club in high school or whatever, stuff like that, and engaged in debates. It's rhetoric, talking. And so in the process of talking, or writing about talking, I should say, Aristotle tries to explain things. He wants to explain things because, philosophers want explanation. They're explainers, they're thinkers. He wants to explain things in concepts and signs. Things like now, when you're talking about language, because he's talking about rhetoric and dialectic and stuff like that. So you got to deal with language. What is a noun? What is a verb? What do they do in a sentence? What is their purpose? What's truth and falseness in language as well? Does the word truly represent the thing? Or is it really representative of the thing, or is it representative of a concept? What is it? When we say horse, okay, that sound itself. Well, first there's the sound. Horse. It's one syllable, right? So it's one real sound. Horse. But when you write it, it's a series of letters. Or the H-O-R. Yeah, so it's 5 letters, but it's one sound actually. But what does that represent? Is it representing the nature of that creature? A horse? So a horse can only be horse? Or is it a concept? Is it a concept? Horseness, you might say. The thing that makes something a horse. So the word could apply to multiple types of horses. They all have horses, right? Which, how would you descriptively say, well, they have 4 legs and has a mane hair, a snout, tail. Of course, I can describe other animals as well, so you have to get more into the biology, but I'm not a biologist, so that's as far as I'm going to go. I know what a horse looks like, I think. But yeah, so he's asking these questions as a philosopher. So he's dealing with kind of first principles first. You gotta, like anyone, any of you do renovations and stuff like that? You're like, your dad's a construction guy, general contractor, help him out, or male or female. Maybe your mom's a general contractor too. Never know. Woman with a nail gun, nothing great. I'm sorry, that was chauvinist. That was just a little joke. No. Anyone watch renovation shows? You like to watch the contests where they house hunters, where they go and they find the house and show them the houses, and they buy a house and then they renovate the house, or renovation contests, so they build a house and they have teams go in and renovate each other. No, just me and my mom. All right. It's probably an age thing, I imagine. I can't. I don't know. Well, when after you're building something or doing something, or you like to cook, it applies to other things. You have to prepare, right? We need some class. I like to cook, like cooking shows. We need some before you can even get to cooking, you have to chop the onions and you have to peel the potatoes and clean the mushrooms, and that takes a long time. What do you think people are doing at the restaurant so early in the morning, you know? Have to clean all the food and prepare it just before they can even cook it. I don't cook. Because it takes like so much time to do the preparation. I finish in like a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, and then the cleanup and the preparation are the whole thing. The enjoyment of the food it's there, but it's not as long. I'll just buy out. Let someone else do it. Anyways, so you know, there's preparation. If you're a contractor, you're building stuff, you have to prepare. You can't just go in and start nailing up stuff. Things have to be in place first. You have to know where you're going to put things, and that's what you're doing in philosophy. Mentally, it's the same kind of process. It's just going on in the mind. You need to establish things. Remember that when you're writing your paper. You know, you can't just jump in and start telling me stuff and assume that I know what you're talking about. Even if I do know what you're talking about, you're writing for the reader, not for yourself. Someone has to read what you're writing. And you might have to explain some of your terms and your words first before you jump into even getting to the argument. And that's what he's doing here. So before he does that, he gets the questions of, you know, the truthfulness of words. What are the words? What are their purposes? He addresses how the parts of sentences relate to the ideas and things in the material world. How do words relate to the material world at all? Is there any connection? Because we'll find out later, not in this class, but in the later class, when we talk about the history of writing, get to the history of writing, you know, like Egyptian hieroglyphics. If you ever saw, you know, like the mummy movies, or, you know, not the one with Tom Cruise, which was terrible, but, you know, like the ones with, what's his name? Forget his name. I can see his face. Brown hair. Brandon Fraser. Yeah, the Mummy movie. I like those. They're fun. You know, they're simple. Huh? They're okay. All right. Yeah, but, you know, watch them around Halloween time. They're okay. A little bit of nudity in it I could do without, but okay. And that's not because I'm a prude. It's just because I'm a sinner. And I know what I need to look out for, you know. But other than that, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. Anyways, but yeah, Egyptian hieroglyphics, where you find that the actual glyph, the actual picture for the word has an essential connection to the word. So they say the picture of a bird really is connected spiritually to bird. And that's why, you know, hieroglyphics were so much used in magical incantations and stuff like that by the Egyptians. And that's also why hieroglyphics kind of got out of control, because they started everything, because everything existed in the other world, the supernatural, and you know, its representation was directly connected to it. So everything had to have its own specific symbol. So it became massive. The hieroglyphics became massive for people to try to write. Too massive, but that was intentional. That was based on their belief. So how do these things relate to the world? So this is what he writes in, what is it? Line 16a, not book 16a, I think it's line 16a, parts 4 through 7 in his book. Who would like to read this for us from Aristotle's De Interpretationis? Man, these boards are really not. It's the board, or maybe, well, this looks like it's old. Maybe this needs to be replaced. Try this. Who would like to read from De Interpretatione? It's better. Ms. Quesada? Go ahead, Ms. Quesada.
And as there are not the same letters among all, so neither have all the same reasons, yet those passions which are soul, which these are signs, are the same among the taste also of which these are
Sound it out. Good. keep going. Similitudes. That's fine. Go ahead. Are the same. Okay. Likenesses. A similitude is a fancy term. It comes from Latin, and it means likeness, which comes from German. So we have the two: likeness, similitude. Thank you, Normans. Anyways, or I shouldn't. Maybe not from the Normans. Probably later. They imported a lot of Latin words in the 17 and 1800s, or maybe the 1700s. Okay. According to our friend Florian Kolmas, whose reading hopefully you either have done or are doing, I know it's a little bit longish, I think. So just get it done when you can. But in that reading, he makes the statement that this statement by Aristotle, this brief statement, quote by Aristotle, has become hugely, or did become hugely influential in Western thinking about writing. Make sure to see if I put, no, I didn't put it on the PowerPoint. So it's this is a hugely influential, when other people later on in Western culture started to think about what writing is and write treatises on writing, okay, kind of redundant, you're writing on writing, what writing is, well, doing it, they would appeal to this definition of Aristotle oftentimes. So it get quoted a lot, all right? So what is Aristotle saying here, okay? Ultimately, what he's saying is that the speech comes from the mind. From the mind. We know it, the brain, but, you know, he didn't know anatomy in that way, but the mind, the mental process, okay? They are these things which are in the voice, they're in our voice, we speak them, but they're what they are, they're symbolic. You already recognize that speech is symbolic. It's not an actual thing. Can't take speech out of my mouth and I can't show it to you, you know, show the actual words. Okay, so it's a symbol. Okay, it's not, well, whatever. Of the passions. Passion is not like love passion or erotic passion. The word passion, and God bless you, in a philosophical sense has like emotion. Okay, emotional. Someone who's passionate is also emotional, and that's basically what's going on in philosophy. We talk about the passions. Passio or patior in Latin means to suffer or something. To suffer. Okay? But, you know, an emotion can be good or bad. It doesn't necessarily have to be something bad like suffering. Okay? So passion. So these symbols come from the emotions of the soul, the person himself or herself, the life force, if you will, that inhabits a person's body, which contains the intellect and the will and all this stuff. He's a philosopher, so you have to know a little bit of philosophy to understand how he's conceiving the person. I'm presuming as senior, you'll get to these issues later in Professor Lewis's classes. Lewis and poetry, I suppose. So, anyways. So, we're talking about what's in the mind. There's symbols in the voice of what's actually going on in the passions of the soul. So basically in the mind, mentally, and then that's expressed. So while the expressions, the symbols may be different amongst all peoples, men and women of the world, he is assuming that since human nature is always one and the same, that the passions that are expressing them are the same. The emotions, one might say. And that the symbols that we use are the signs of those passions are the same. They're the same amongst all. And the final thing, likenesses. Yeah, they're likenesses. I'm trying to get to similitude. They're likenesses of what's going, of the mental experience or the mental activity. So they should be the same. Generally, I think this is borne out. I mean, I've always loved languages, and so not a linguist, but you know, I read about it as like a hobby. You know, I find it interesting. But yeah, I mean, in the study of languages, different languages of the world, they're very different. I mean, languages are very different. But yeah, there does seem to be a common, because it's from the human person. There does seem to be a commonality amongst them, even if their grammars or their structures are very, very different. Obviously, their words, a lot of them are very, very different and stuff like that. And some languages have words for things, and some languages don't have words for things because they haven't encountered them or stuff like that. But the emotions are the same, you know, hate, love, envy, desire, happiness, all sorts of stuff, fear, all these things, these emotions that we have, and even just thoughts. Obviously, we think, and humans seem to tend to think about a lot of the same things, so they need words to express those things. So I think, Aristotle, even though he didn't know, he wasn't a neuroscientist, or he wasn't an anthropologist or a linguist, but he did have, I think he is still right here, that the mental experience is kind of the same for all people who are human, okay? Because I'd say we're structured the same. Our genetics and the way we evolve, we evolve the same. So, we're all human beings, right? So stand to reason that we all kind of think and act alike in certain ways, because we're all the same species. If we didn't, then it would be kind of weird, we've got places for people who are like that. Anyways, so for Aristotle, writing and those influenced by Aristotle's definition in the West, writing was secondary. It was a secondary sign system, you might say, system of signs. The primary system was the mental experience that was going on, that was being expressed. So it's a secondary sign system. And it serves the purpose of substituting similitude, likeness, substitutes or represents the primary sign system, which is speech, which is the thought kind of coming out of the person's mind. Okay, the expression of the thought that's in the mind. So you've kind of got three processes going on. The original conception in the mind, expressed out by the person's mind in their speech. But then that speech gets actually written down in another sign system. So speech coming from the mind would be primary because it's more direct with the mental process, and writing it down eventually would be secondary. So Aristotle, we have three things. We have mental experience. Whoops. Actually, I'll go here first. We have, thought emotion, or the mental experience. I probably should have put this on the top, because it's going down. I'm kind of going down from the secondary thing to the primary. I probably should have reversed it. So just make a note of this. Follow the arrows, okay? But actually follow them up. I'm going to start with this. The mental experience, which is the thought or the emotion, the passions, as Aristotle calls them, which is expressed through speech, through speaking, and then goes to writing, the written words. Okay, the speech are symbols of the mental experience, and then the written words are symbols not of the mental experience, but they're just symbols of the spoken words, the speech. Why is this important to understand? Because you'll see why in the ancient world, like Greece and a lot of other places, orality, speaking, was much more important than writing. Writing was looked down upon. Writing was seen as a corruption, because speech came directly from the mental experience. You knew exactly what I was thinking immediately. But if I had to write it down for you, well, now you've put something in the way. You've given me a text that now I have to interpret, like, what did he mean? What do these words mean? Maybe, stuff like that. So there's all right, I'm throwing in this guy, Dai Tong, Chinese. Just to give you another idea of how other people thought about things and see similarities and differences. This man, Dai Tong, who flourished, we say flourished, floruit in Latin. This is a Latin abbreviation for floruit, meaning flourished in the 1200s AD. Why do we say flourished? Because we don't really know the exact dates of when he was born and when he died. We just have an approximate range of when he was active, writing and doing stuff. God bless you. Keep me humble. So the 13th century, so about 700 years ago is when he lived. And he wrote a book called The Six Scripts, a book on writing, The Six Scripts, or the Principles of Chinese Writing. And I took this little tidbit from his book. His famous definition, within Asian culture, Eastern culture, for what writing is. And who would like to read that? Mr. Jastrzemski, you with me? You got me? You want to read Dai Tong?
No.
Nah. I hear you, sir. I don't want to read them either.
Sorry.
Huh? Okay. We all are, sir. We all are. We're all on this little blue ball going around a star somewhere. Mr. Lebedinsky, go ahead.
Speech. Both writing and speech are flowers.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. And I like this definition or this explanation. It's more direct, I think, not as philosophical as Aristotle's. I can understand this better. For me, I can. So talking about writing as pictured speech, it's a picture of what I'm saying. Well, that's appropriate to Chinese culture because we'll learn later that, yeah, Chinese writing is based on pictures, pictured writing. And then it evolves to become characters, which, there's still images of things, but they come originally from pictures. So that's his experience of writing. That was not the experience for Aristotle. He was writing Greek. He was using an alphabet. He was not using a picture system. Okay? So there's each individual symbols. And a picture is not necessarily the same as a symbol. Okay? Because the Mona Lisa is a picture, but it's not a symbol of anything. Right? Maybe it could be, but then I'm creating something from it if I want to make it into a symbol. Like if I want to make it a symbol of love or something like that. But a stop sign is a picture, red sign with the word stop or some word written on it that tells you to stop, but it's a symbol. You see red and you know red means to stop. Why does the color red mean to cease motion? Why? Why not blue? Not pink? Right? What's it about red that gets your attention and makes you stop? I don't know. Symbol. It's a symbol of something. Stop moving. Apply the brake pedal. So writing is pictured speech. It's my speech that I use pictures to represent what I'm saying. And I like this next bit about speaking is vocalized breath. Interesting. So he gets to that. That's the movement of the breath that we use to then our voice. But, Aristotle was there as well. I mean, he mentions the voice as well. But I don't know what about Dai Tong I like with this, but just vocalized breath is what speech is. Because it is. I mean, there are many different ways you can move the mouth, and that's why we have different languages. I moved the other day, this past summer, when I was working on a class and working on other things and stuff, I was listening to a lot of operas on YouTube. And I like opera. So listening to old operas from the 1700s or 1800s. And I also like obscure things or weird things. So I was looking for found Georgian opera, the Georgian language, and Armenian opera. Two very difficult languages to speak. Not only are the grammars for each really difficult, but there's something about the Caucasus Mountains. Caucasian, yeah, for white people. Is it, sometimes, I don't even know if we're supposed to use that word anymore, but anyways, Caucasoid, Caucasian. But where did that come from? Well, because of the belief that, remember, Indo-Europeans came from the Black Sea, just above the Caucasus Mountains. Caucasus Mountains are there. Caucasian. And there's a whole slew of little languages in the valleys and stuff like that in the mountains, a lot of them isolated, so they developed really weird ways of speaking. But one thing they have in common is that they love piling consonants together. So you can have a whole word with just consonants and no vowels. It's like trying to speak Klingon. It's like Klingon on steroids. There's no vowel at all. but Georgian. So they were singing an opera in Georgian that I listened to, which was very nice. But I had to make a little comment on it. Like I can only imagine what the opera singers were going through, trying to, especially if they didn't speak Georgian natively, because it is a very hard language. Vocalized speech, we can do a lot of things with the voice. So why it's so hard to learn certain languages. Okay, so speech is dependent on the breath. He recognizes that physical function, how we speak, which I don't think Aristotle so much does, but he recognizes the anatomical function that air is being forced out of our body to create the speech, or come in. In some languages, you breathe in for certain consonants or certain sounds, not in English generally, but in other languages. So he recognizes that. And then the writing takes over. And he agrees with Aristotle. He comes up with the same idea that Aristotle did, which was that, writing and speech are common to, obviously, if they're common to humanity, it's obvious that if speech is common, then writing should be common, even though it's different. Each group has its own natural appointment, which is a fancy way of saying that, it's different. There are differences, obviously. Not everyone writes and speaks the same way. It's because people don't speak the same way. You shouldn't expect them to write the same way. They should have different alphabets or systems. Originally, see, where are we here? Now we're here, and then we're here. Originally, according to, if you believe linguists and anthropologists and archaeologists, writing came from pictures. Which again, making a picture is not the same thing as writing. Okay, because just because I draw what seems like a female form with immensely huge breasts, and there's a purpose to why I'm giving this example, but if I write, a woman with an immensely huge breasts and also a big belly, it could just be a picture of a woman. I'm not writing a word. Okay, I'm indicating something. It's a picture. But it could also be a representation of something if there's meaning assigned to the picture. Like originally it was a picture of a woman with huge breasts and a big belly, and it came to be the word for pregnancy, and that's the symbol for pregnancy. Or that's the symbol for even a broader idea of abundance, to have an abundance of stuff. Fat woman with huge breasts, with huge lactating breasts. You see this all throughout the ancient world. They find all these statues of what appear to be female women with pregnant, and it was a symbol of hopefully good things, not famine. That you wouldn't be starving, that you would have an abundance. So writing came from this process. A picture is just a picture. It can be just a woman or a man or dogs playing poker, I always love to look and see which of the dogs is cheating. What do you think? German Shepherd? German Shepherd would cheat, Ms. Diversa? Think so? No? Not German Shepherd? What kind of dog do you think would cheat? Ms. I got you. The back. Ms. Reynolds? Ms. Reynolds in the corner? Okay. What do you think? Golden Retriever? Poodle? Cheat during a poker game? Poodle? I know a cat would definitely cheat. That's because I have a cat. I have no illusions about her morality. So pictures, so that's just a picture, it's not telling a story. It's not a book. Okay, it's not a writing. Pictures serve, but pictures also, what they share with writing is that they also are visual expressions of a person's ideas. Sometimes, if you looked at the classic, kind of picture of, the dog sitting around the table playing poker. What idea really is the guy or the person who painted that trying to express? Maybe something goofy or funny or silly or whatever. But I don't think that there's not much going on there. Then sometimes a picture of dogs playing poker. This Cobb. This is a picture of dogs playing poker. That's all it's meant to be, you know. I was inspired to paint it. No reason. I was inspired. I thought it would be funny or whatever. So it's a visual expression of a person's ideas. Sometimes it is. It can be. But these are largely independent of speech. Pictures are largely independent of speech. You don't speak a picture, but a writing you do. I mean, you're writing down, right? You're not drawing pictures of what I'm saying, or you're not basing pictures off of what I'm saying. You're writing. It's different. Not drawing. Maybe you could. Maybe if we did have a certain kind of culture where they, drew pictures rather, and there are cultures that do that, draw pictures more than record writing to express stuff. But basically, you're expressing ideas. The difference is that a picture is largely independent of any kind of speech or explanation. So, you go to an art gallery, and there's no explanation. You're supposed to think, it's big white painting with a red dot in it, What does it mean? Well, that shows that you're a rube. If you start asking, what is that? Okay, get the punter out of here, all right? You're going to get some dirty looks from people because you don't understand, Philistine. It's a picture. But that's a different question when you give me something like you hand in your paper and I ask you, well, what does it mean? That's important that I know what it means. So you see that kind of difference there between picture making, which is kind of independent of speech or concepts and stuff like that, and writing, which is very much reliant on that. So writing is different from pictures because a picture also only represents an object, and it doesn't really tell you much. It's open to a lot of interpretation. And people have been arguing for a long, long time, centuries now, over Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. What is she smiling about? Is she smiling in the painting? Is she not smiling? All this other stuff. People usually focus on Mona Lisa's smile. If she's smiling, there are some art historians who think they don't see a smile there at all on her lips. Because the painting, why is there a debate? Because the painting doesn't tell us anything. It's completely mute. It only represents something. So here, this is something I made, this crude thing. Is it a picture? Is it writing? If it's a picture, it's just that. So what does it mean? What do you think it means? What do you think I'm trying to communicate here with these three pictures? All right, I opened it. Unfortunately, just so you know, if you go out, the door is locking. It's totally locked all the time. With this, the button does nothing. So I got to call maintenance and tell them there's something on the door. Just be aware of it. Got that out in this class. Students went out. Is almost there. Stills. Cold speed, Heidi? No, that's the other one. That's another one. Oh, I see. I think I got you. Oh, da, 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 da. No, no, no. No. Maybe I don't have you in my head yet. Not Miss Kelsey, are you? You're Miss Kelsey. Okay. What do you think, Miss Kelsey? What do you think I'm trying to express? Sure. Why not?
Can you explain what I'm trying to say?
Nope. It's all on you. What are you going to do if you're an archaeologist and you're digging around and you stumble across this, like this carved into the side of rock or something? What are you going to do with it? There's nobody there to tell you what they meant. What do you think?
What they stand for?
Yeah, what do you think?
A human, counts.
A human, and what was the second thing?
Out.
Oh, I think that's a house. What do you think the third thing is? Like, what do you think? Stop.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, who has hand? Mr. Don't tell me. Dalton, no, it's Dalton McMaster. Okay. What is it?
Oh, it looks like weed.
Weed?
Crop.
Crop? Okay, interesting. Why do you think it looks like wheat? Why does that come into your mind?
The ends that stick out.
So yeah, no, I can see it. Sheep of wheat. Yeah, I can see a sheep with teeth that's got the stuff sticking out. Okay, interesting. Do you think that Ms. Kelsey is accurate with the first two, man and house? You see the same thing? Why? Why do you think that?
House references, symbols carry meaning. Stop sign, stop sign.
Okay. What, do these look like a stop sign?
Oh, it looks like a house.
You, that's what a house looks like?
What a 4-year-old moving on.
Okay. That's what a human being looks like? Maybe when it was aliens, you know, they just like third encounter, close encounter with a very kind, they're all in the street, big heads. Maybe that's close. They're not human beings, they're aliens. I guess you're saying it looks like your concept of a human or a being, a house you wanted to, and as the verse says, it looks like what you would draw if you wanted to draw a house. Okay. But I mean, do all houses look like that? I mean, does a house look like that in Africa? Some parts of Africa, at least. More like a Western house, right? So why are you defining houseness, Mr. Wojciechowski, by Western ideas?
What we know, like go with what like concept of a house is.
So now you're going to impose it on the rest of the world? And tell them, people in Japan, this is what a house is supposed to look like? I'm just messing with that. That's okay. You don't have to answer that. That's not... Yeah, they're pictures, right? Yeah. I don't. Think about it. What is it about these pictures, Mr. McKillop? Yeah, Mr. McKillop. What is it about these pictures? What suggests about a circle, a line, and some other, diagonal lines? What does that suggest to human being? But why is this a circle like that? Why would you immediately assume that it's a head? Huh?
Is our head into the circle?
A head looks like a circle? Really? Like Gumby? Hey, Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill. No, that's not Gumby. That's Mr. Bill. I'm sorry, I confused Gumby with Mr. Bill. Mr. Gumby's head goes up. Sorry about that. Apologize, Mr. Bill fans. Okay. All right. And people shook their heads, and I said, is that what a house looked like? Well, not all houses have, a roof like that. I don't know what it's called. I'm not a builder. So, some have flat roofs, some have, other types of roof and stuff like that. So why would that suggest a house to you? Why would it not suggest, should it not, if you have different conceptions of a house? Why do you take that as the standard symbol for a house? is. All right, Ms. Tran, what do you think the third one is? Mr. McMaster says it's the sheaf of wheat. Do you agree with that, or do you think it might be something else? Could be something else?
Or things.
Okay. So you think the message is the human-like, possibly human-like figure means I'm at home. But no, but these are concepts now. These are not, you're talking conceptually. Interesting. You're really getting conceptual here. Okay, not a human being, and I'm home, which is a concept. It's not a house. An apartment can be your home. Any place can be your home if you're making your home. A house, and you're here now. That's interesting. Yeah, that last thing, which Mr. Master thinks is a sheaf of wheat, could be a tree, maybe branches going out. It could be maybe it's a grammatical marker indicating the past. House, and it indicates like the past, like the concept of was. I was at home. Maybe you took it away, then it means I home, I house. So I home, I'm at home. But you don't know, right? Because they're just pictures. They have to be interpreted, right? They have to be interpreted. They're just pictures. These are not words. These are not letters. There's a difference between pictures, picture writing. We can use that word writing. And writing. I guess we would say, Ms. McErlane, yeah, writing. All right? This says nothing to you. I mean, you don't know this as a human being. For all you know, this could be like a symbol of, well, this could be a symbol of a tree if you wanted it. This is the whatchamacallit, not the body, what do you call it? Not the stump. What do you call it? The middle part, the main part. We got the thing that the branches come off. There's a word. Well, you know what I'm talking about, right? So you know what I'm talking about. I just can't think of the word right now. That's all right. When you get to be my age, it starts happening. Gotta expect it. I guess it's not a stump, because a stump is when it's cut off, right? But anyways, and this is like, the canopy or the leaves or something. These are branches or something like that. Could be an arrow. Could be a symbol for an astronomical symbol for one of the planets in the sky or the stars. This could simply be directional, Ms. Prawl, pointing up or pointing in whatever direction, And if I'm right that this is a tree, then it could mean, man, if this is a human, man or woman, because we don't know. But, person goes up a tree or climbs up a tree if you want to extrapolate from that. But you don't know unless you know what the pictures mean. They say nothing. But writing is not merely pictures. It can be, some forms of writing are based on pictures and retain that connection. It's not mere picture. Writing is not mere pictures or representations of objects. It's a representation of thought, of what someone is thinking or what someone is saying. And that's important to note, sir. God bless you, sir. You're keeping me humble. Sir, they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chairs open up here, sir. No waiting. I bet you if I were serving like ice cream or something, you'd be front and center. But just because it's education, Mr. Lebedinsky. All right. Anyways. That's important, thinking or saying, because it's not just speech. Maybe this is something that Aristotle forgot about. It's not just speaking, but thinking as well. In the ancient world, they were very much focused on speaking. You didn't even read silently. That was very weird. Like Julius Caesar, who was the emperor of Rome at one time, he was no, they mentioned that, one of the historians mentioned that he used to read silently, and it was considered very unusual because you always read out loud. You didn't read silently. That's a modern thing. That used to have people in a library. Shh. No, tell the librarian, crack open a history book of the ancient world. No, we should all be speaking out what we're reading. But anyways, but Julius Caesar would read himself. So he was making the thoughts in his head, and they couldn't figure out how is he making thoughts in his head without speaking them. But I can, and this was, I don't know if anyone saw this movie. It's a Canadian film. Maybe they showed it in your, well, they probably didn't show it in your Catholic school if you went to Catholic school because there's a sex scene, but whatever. Anyways, not really necessary, but it does. It's a movie called Black Robe. It's about Jesuit missionaries in the New World amongst the Indians, the Native Americans. Anyone hear of this movie? Happen to chance upon it? Black Robe? No. Okay, fine. I wouldn't expect you to. It's a Canadian film, and it probably wasn't shown here in the US. I only know about it because, it was graduate course I was taking, and we had to write a paper on films, and I wrote it on Black. Anyways, it's just an interesting part of it, and it's based on the writings of the Jesuit missionaries. They were great Jesuits, Society of Jesus, religious order of priests in the Catholic Church, and they were great missionaries, and they're great, record keepers. So they would all write down their experiences, send them back to Europe to the main office. They give reports about what was going on, and describe all the customs and stuff of the natives they were amongst. In this case, they were in North America. Actually, it was French North America. It was under the control of the French at the time, not the British. And they have a scene in the movie which is based in reality, which is one thing that fascinated me. Don't worry. One of the things that fascinated me, I'm not looking for anybody. I just like to walk around, so don't worry. All right, I'm not trying to catch anybody. That fascinated the Native Americans was writing. The fact that, because they didn't have it. Okay, everything was spoken. You had to tell everybody everything. You had to remember everything. All right. But they would see, one of the Jesuit priests would write something down on a piece of paper or writing out his letters or something and say, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm writing down my thoughts. And they're like, what? I don't understand. Show us. They thought it was like magic. They thought they were witches. Because they would, and in the movie, they have this scene where they show them it. They show them the process. One of the Jesuits says, okay, let me write this. I'm going to write, tell me something. One guy tells him something. Just writes it down on his paper. He goes over to another guy who's over there, who couldn't hear what was said. He gives him the paper. The guy reads it. He said, you told him to the native guy, you told him this. And he goes, oh, how do you know what I said to him? Just by looking at that paper. It must be magic. You must be witches. You must kill you. That's just remarks. Anyways, that's another story. But yeah, they blew their minds. They couldn't figure that out. So you can be thinking, not saying a word, and yet write stuff down. Not just, speaking and writing. Writing is human, okay? It's a human contrivance, okay? It's an artifact, okay? It's what we call an artifact. It's a human contrivance. Other animals don't do this. Human beings do this. Yes, excuse me, I know you'll probably go on some website on the internet and find out that, some person taught a crow how to write the word dog or something. All right. But, okay, fine. But, usually it comes down to, I remember one, I just had to comment on this one site. It was so stupid. It was a science site. I should have known better. Publishing, crowing, no pun intended, about someone who was able to teach crows the concept of zero, because of null, the concept of null or zero, because the assumption was that animals couldn't conceive of null or zero like humans could. I'm like, okay, so this was like a big deal. They're making a big thing on the science site. And I looked at the paper and the research, and I'm not a scientist at that level, but you know, I can hear someone shoveling from a mile away. And yes, some of the crows, some of the birds apparently were able to conceive of the concept after they were primed over and over and over again by the human testers. But no, they didn't naturally just understand it. They didn't. Not like you showed up to math class and you understood the difference between, 1 plus 0 is 1. As a little child, you could understand that. And no one had to explain to you what 0 was. The crows had to prime them. So like, yeah, good work. A gorilla can learn sign language. But look for the other primate in the room who is teaching the gorilla sign language. That's what I would say. Who taught that primate? Probably another primate with a large brain capacity. Okay? Us, humans. We create artifacts. That's how archaeologists, speaking of archaeology, know the difference when they've stumbled upon a find, as they call it. God bless you. Right there with you. When they stumble upon a find, or when they just stumble upon a bunch of garbage and junk that is nothing, It can be just a bunch of piles of rocks, or if you find artifacts, then you found something. Artefactio. Factio in Latin means to make or to do. Arte, from the word art, ars artis in Latin, but this is the ablative form. By art, I make. So by skill, it also has the sense of skill, okay? By art, art is a skill. So to do something with skill, okay? Yes, there are chimpanzees or monkeys that can make tools and stick them into the tree, stick them into the hole or something and pull them out and have all the ants on them, and then they can eat all the ants, right? They can figure that out, all right? And you can say, well, monkeys are using tools, right? Yeah, true, yes, okay. So that's where humans got it from. All right, maybe. But if the monkey or the chimpanzee goes a step further and makes a power saw and saws open the tree and then starts scooping out the ants, well, then, that's probably a tool, using a tool with skill or something like that. So what differentiates it from just doing something? Because we all, creatures, all of us can do something. A fish does something. Okay, other animals can do things. Okay, if you have pets and stuff like that, or dogs or cats, they pick up and run with a ball just like anybody else. Any other kid can, like you can. They can catch a frisbee just like you can. Do they do it with skill? Humans can do things with skill. Dog can catch a frisbee with skill. Yes, very well. If you teach it, doesn't do it just naturally, So dogs just don't have it naturally in their instinct to run through a course of stuff and jump over things and blah, 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 blah to get a prize. You teach them. We do this. It's an artifact, a thing that seems to have been made or produced by human agency or action. We find something buried somewhere or someone, and we're like, this looks like it could only have been done by a human. Well, how do you know? I mean, like if you're digging in the ocean, you're a marine biologist or a marine archaeologist. There are those too. And you're digging down in the Bahamas, you're swimming around, and you find what looks like a road under the water. These perfectly square, well, not perfectly, but square stones, which seem to have cut marks on them, one after the other, after the other, after the other, now under the water, which is not unusual. I mean, because the ocean levels have changed over time, even in recent times. So it's possible the water covered something that was a human structure. But it looks human, right? Why? Because it's made with skill. Nature doesn't work that way, usually. Maybe crystals. Maybe there's a perfectly square crystal or something like that. But I mean, you look out the window at like the trees and stuff, they're beautiful. I love them. But they're not skillful. They're just doing their thing, you know? But if I look out at the tree and all of the branches and the whole thing is like in a perfect globe, like everything is in a perfect cut, and it looks like it's been cut in a perfect globe, I don't think that happened naturally with the tree. Unless it's a certain species of tree, okay? But I'm gonna think like if a bush looks like a horse, probably been trimmed by somebody. Human agency is involved, artifacts. But you still have to be clever, okay? Because it is possible that when rocks form, a rock could form in a square formation, and you might think that but that's when you have to think about stuff. I mean, it's not easy. Archaeology is not easy, and stuff like this is not easy. That's also what makes it interesting, okay? And sometimes you do have weird things happen, like in nature, just seen naturally, like the planet Saturn. Sent out probes and stuff, yes? NASA, many, many years ago, sent out satellites and things to different planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, to do flybys, to take pictures, to scan them, to see, what they're made of, what's in the atmosphere and stuff like that, and take a lot of pictures. They took pictures of Saturn. Okay, interesting, which is a gas giant. Seems to be not a hard planet, but just like gas that's being held together. And the satellite went around the planet, was taking pictures, and got up, I think it's the North Pole of Saturn. And in the gas, which is vapor, okay, you know what vapor is. See water vapor, it's fog, stuff like that, There was a perfect hexagon. There's a perfect hexagon rotating on the top of Saturn. A hexagon is a six-sided parallelogram from geometry. Hex means six in Greek. That usually doesn't happen naturally in nature. That usually, a hexagon seems to be we've created in geometry. It's not something that we just, so how is it there? And not only is it there, it's a gaseous planet. So it's not physical. I mean, it's possible in some physical way, a hexagon, just by coincidence, could have been carved into a rock or something, and no human did it or whatever. But a gaseous planet, gas, forms a geometric figure? Maybe it does. Apparently it does. It's only done it on Saturn of all our planets. The other gaseous planets don't have this, but Saturn does for some reason. Weird. So again, you have to be, is it an artifact? Sometimes you have to ask questions. Obviously, no human put that hexagon on Saturn. I think that's pretty, I can't say for sure. I can't say for sure because I've never been to Saturn. Okay, so I can't disprove what I have no evidence for. It's a totally gratuitous assumption on my part, which can be gratuitously denied. But I'm assuming, Ms. Taylor, that it's not a human artifact. Assume. Writing is also a technology. It's not just something done by human agency. It's also it's an art, a skill, as I said, a skill, okay? Something done with skill. Ars artis. So I have another word here, which is from Greek, not from Latin. Artifact is from Latin, but this comes from techne in Greek, which means art and skill, a craft, but it can also mean a form of knowledge, And ultimately it comes from the Greek word tikto, the verb tikto, which means to bring forth, to beget, which, is again a naturalistic meaning to the word, basically pregnancy, a man begets a child, he has sex with a woman and she gets pregnant, tikto, okay? So begetting or generating, so it's a production, okay, it's produced. So a technology is the manner in which something, or knowledge, I should say, is applied in practice. Information technology, yes. We're applying our knowledge of computer coding and how computers work in practice, which is, fixing usually stuff when stuff gets jumbled up and it's not working properly. Right? It's a technology. It's an art or a skill that we use to make a product. Tools. Okay. Simple thing. Tools. But it also, I like that, it can also be a form of knowledge, technology as well. Because that's kind of like what writing is doing. It's a form of knowledge, knowing things. And so writing is a technology. It's a tool. It's a form of knowledge. It imparts meaning. Okay? It's a tool that is used to convey knowledge of the mind of the person, what I'm thinking to you. Okay, if I weren't standing here talking to you, but I just printed out my notes and gave them to you, and you could read them, then it can just convey to you what's in my mind. But it also expresses what I do say to you, what's in my mind in speech, in speaking to you. So as a technology, writing is the act of creating a persistent representation of human language. Okay? Representing what I'm saying to you in a manner that lasts. Okay? What you're writing down of what I'm saying will last even after I've said it. See, my words are already gone. But if you've been writing this down on your computer, I haven't seen a lot of people doing, but whatever. I'm still getting paid. But anyways, if you just wrote down what I said, don't write down the joke back. You're not going to test it on them. I don't want to get fired. Okay? But anyways, if you've written down what I've just been saying, then it's continuing on, even though I've stopped saying it and it's gone. Even my thought is gone. It's not there anymore. I've passed by my thought and talked about something else. It's gone. But it persists in your notes, if you write it down, or it persists in my notes that I read from. So it has lastingness, some persistence. A writing, well, how do we write? We have to have a system of writing, and eventually human beings developed a writing system, which is a set of symbols with rules about how to write them down and put them together, which is an encoding, again, a coding, symbolism, encoding, and that's what code is, even computer code. It's symbolic, all sorts of symbols and stuff that tell the computer or whatever it's telling, I don't know, to do what to do. And that's why it's so hard to learn, because there are all these little syllables. Sometimes the words mean something, but sometimes they're abbreviations of words or other stuff. Sometimes they just don't mean anything. They're just symbols like, forward slash, or, and a plus, not a plus sign, a greater than or less than sign. But there's symbols with rules that encode aspects of the spoken language. So they encode vocabulary, okay, vocabulary, words, can also encode syntax, like whether you're asking a question or not. Some languages do that, you write a question mark. It's a symbol indicating that the words that just came before should be understood as a question and not as a declarative statement, or not as a command. They indicate that to you. Sometimes they indicate grammatical relationships. The girl's book, girl apostrophe S. Why do you write this little jot? Just a symbol, because it's a symbol of, the symbol of a letter that used to be there, letter E, girl's book. We don't, anyways. But, it's just symbolic of the possessive, so that it's possessive and not plural. Girls, possessive. If I say girls, you don't know what I'm referring to. But if you see it written, girls, Girls, Mr. Seraphin, it's a plural. But if it had an apostrophe S, you would know it's referring to a possessive, even if no word follows it. You just know from that symbol. So it expresses syntax and grammar. And according to our old buddy, I'll end with this. According to our old buddy Florian Kolmas in his article, or is it his book, Writing Systems, An Introduction to Their Linguistic Analysis, he says that writing is, quote, the single most consequential technology ever invented. That's in his opinion. Of all the technologies that human beings have invented, I don't know. I think if someone dropped a book on me, it'd be, okay. Maybe on my head, it might be, I might have a little bump or a bruise, but if they dropped an atom bomb on me, I'd be like, that's more consequential. But anyways, writing is the single most consequential technology ever invented. So take note of that. Okay, God bless you all. I will see you next Tuesday. What's today, the 28th or 27th? 26th, I think it's the 28th. Good day, sir. Have a good day, sir. Hey, sir. Yeah. Have a good day, sir. Good. Sir? Yes. Good day, sir. Miss Bob? Yes. Good to see you. Have a good day, sir. Good. Good day. Have a good day, sir. Good day, miss. Yeah, have a good day. Good to see you. Crystal. Hello. See you. Come on in. Hello, miss. Hello, miss. Hello, miss. See you, miss. Come on in, sir. Have a good day, miss. Thank you.